Hello, and welcome to a special interview with Heritage Village resident David Egee about his recent completion of a coast-to-coast road trip on Route 6 in his 1929 Model A Ford Roadster. David, thanks for taking some time to tell us about your recent trip. I think many residents have seen you driving around in your Model A Ford, and as a neighbor who lives in the same cluster, I have to say many of us have been admiring the car for some time. But before we get to the specifics of the car and the trip and some of your wonderful stories that you gathered along the way, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and where were you born and raised?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised not too far from here, in Newtown, Connecticut. And as you'll hear, I went the length of Route 6 from Massachusetts to California, and Route 6 went literally right by the house that I lived in. My father was a GP, had his office in that house, and if he was outside doing something, someone might stop and say, "Sorry, but could you tell me where Route 6 is?" And he'd say, "Well, you're on it, and if you keep driving, you'll come to California." And that's pretty much what I did.
Okay. Now, as you said to me, you were born and raised on Route 6, went to school in Newtown, but I believe you've gone to a few other schools here in the area.
Yes, I started in the Holly School, which happened to be literally across the street from where I was born and raised, and then went to a private school called Rumsey Hall in Washington, Connecticut, and went to Worcester School in Danbury, Connecticut, and it's not, I didn't get thrown out of these schools, but for one reason or another I moved on.
Okay.
And then went to Boston University and graduated from there in 1961. And that's the educate. Well, then I went to Columbia University in New York to get a master's degree in hospital administration, and that's what that was my career for the rest of my life.
Very good. And some of that career being over in Lebanon.
Well, my wife and I and 4 children, our first move overseas was in 1968, and we went to Beirut, Lebanon. All of our friends thought we were crazy. The war, the 1967 war was just over, and we went over in 68. And then was there for 7 years, and then our next assignment was in Rome, where we lived for 2 years. And then we went to Dubai and lived there for 2 years. And for our sins, we went to Libya and lived there for 18 months before coming to England. I was working out of London, and I went there in 1975 and remained. And after being there for 7 years, I decided I liked it. And my wife liked it, and my 4 children, they had to like it. And so remained there, swore allegiance to the Queen, and became a British subject. And now I'm retired and in London, and coming to Heritage Village every summer, well, just for the past 3 summers, and I intend to continue here. My wife died 2 years ago, but I'll be coming every summer.
Okay.
And
Well, if people want to know more about your prior adventures, not the adventure we'll talk about today, David has written an excellent book called Wake Up Running, and I found it quite interesting to learn more about what Newtown was like back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and a pretty phenomenal career. But why don't we talk a little bit about your car?
if you would allow me, Ed, I'll make a short plug for my book.
Okay.
It's
I'll
called,
hold it up again.
it's called Wake Up Running. And the title is taken from an Arab proverb which says that when the lion wakes up in the morning, he has to run faster than the gazelle. And when the gazelle wakes up in the morning, he has to run faster than the lion. So whether you're a lion or a gazelle, you have to wake up running.
And I think you'll find if you read this book, David woke up every morning running, especially in some of the countries you just mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about the car. Now, I understand this is not your first Model A Ford.
That's right. My first Model A Ford, Model A Ford was, I bought when I was 16 years old. I'd gotten my license and I was preparing for that date, saving my money, working for Al Boyson's Dairy in Newtown every summer and school holidays, and saved up my money and bought the car. It was $75 at that time. As I recall, it was $75. I'm not sure what that's worth today. And that's when how I bought my first Model A Ford Roadster. But the second one I bought is the one I have now, and I bought that because an old girlfriend, when I was 16 years old, sent me an email. So that would have been about 58 years later, sent me an email saying, wasn't this the car that you took me for a ride in back in when you were 16? And so I answered, yes, that's exactly what the car looked like. And I was so overwhelmed by the fact that an old girlfriend should contact me, and secondly that the car was available. Bought it on email.
I think eBay.
eBay,
Right.
Sorry, eBay, and had it shipped to. It was in Texas, and I had it shipped to Connecticut, and there. That's how I got this Model A.
It was just a bit more than $75 this time?
No, it was a little bit more now.
Okay. But so step one was the car, and it is a fabulous looking car, and we'll keep coming back to the role that the car plays in your trip. But still, this was quite an undertaking to want to take that car from coast to coast. So tell us a little bit about how that idea came to your mind.
That was interesting. Well, when I bought the car and had received it and drove it around a bit, I realized that it needed to have more work done on it than I thought. And there was a chap who has his own private garage in New Milford, Ted, and I called him and said that I needed some work done on my car. And so I took it to him. He had it for about 3 weeks, presented me with a bill for about $3,500 and said, David, your car is running great, and you could drive this all the way to California if you wanted to. He said it very casually. And I thought later, there's an interesting challenge. We talked about it a bit more. He explained to me the little history of Route 6, being the famous, it's a historical route. It was and is to this day the longest contiguous highway from Massachusetts to California. There's another one, I think it's Route 20, that is now currently long. It is longer, but there's a break in it going through Yellowstone National Park.
Okay.
But the Route 6 went all the way through the Rockies, and anyway, so that was the reason that I actually decided to do it, a challenge.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like originally you were going to take it in sort of bite-sized pieces over a couple of years, but then life changed a little bit, and so
Yes.
you first started out. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the car, because it's pretty much original. In other words, people get in cars today, and they might have a GPS to help them get where they're going. They might have a radio, FM radio, so they could listen to music, or they might have attachments to listen to podcasts or CDs, connections for their smartphone. How many of these things does your car have?
It certainly has none of those things, and including no windscreen wiper, and no windows. It's a roadster, so the top does go down, and that's it. When it rains, you just put the top up and hope that the rain's going to come straight down rather than be pushed by the wind through your car. It is all original. It's original engine, and just for some technical information to the male audience, it's a 40 horsepower engine with a downhill slope and a prevailing wind. I can get up to about 40 or 45 miles an hour. That's the top. But when I crossed America, doing the math, it worked out at about 35 miles an hour.
Okay. Now, I mean, a couple of other features that some people probably have never driven without is power steering and power brakes.
Yeah, that's right.
They're non-existent on your car.
The brakes are mechanical, and you have to anticipate. You have to have a good idea how far down the road you have got to stop. And the power steering, of course, it steers like a tank, but it makes an impression no matter where you go. And I can tell you, if I stop at a hardware store, I'll get the biggest crowds. I'll come out of the store, and they'll be mostly men over 75 who are, looking looking at it very carefully. And on occasion, they'll even take the hood up to look into the engine. And that'll be some guy whose father had one, or he had one when he was a kid. And as Ed said earlier, it's a bit of a you're an instant celebrity when you drive around in one of these cars and stop for petrol in going, in small towns. There'll be then somebody coming around. So I met a lot of people just with the car.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest, you weren't trying to establish a land speed record going coast to coast, but what you were trying to do, as I understand it, was kind of get a sense of who is America by talking to people along the way. And the way I see it, or saw it, is the Model A was your icebreaker to get people to come over and talk to you so you could talk to them. And I think one of the things that our audience would be very interested in is some of the people that you met, or stories about the people that you met along the way. Any particular one?
That is and was the major part of this venture, was having the opportunity to see America at 35 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going across Nebraska and Utah, and in Utah there was an area with a big sign saying no services for 160 miles. There was nothing. Forget no services. There was no house, nothing. And I forgot what
We were just talking about some of the people that you met along
Yeah.
the way who
so
might come out to see the vehicle.
yeah. So driving along, and partly because I'm going so slow, people would wave. Kids would shout, and I'd toot the horn, and it's the old-fashioned sound that you hear in movies and things like that, of the ooga ooga kind of horn, and that usually that was also part of the fun. But the people that I met, the experience that I had was exhilarating. I just never imagined it would be that I would meet so many people and talk to so many people, and I never had been in the Midwest or West, far West. So it was from the people and from the what I observed, including city sprawl, I think you call it. Right. And I think city sprawl runs from about Waterbury all the way up to Cape Cod. But
Dave, it may be interesting to just talk about a typical day.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Well,
what did you try to accomplish in a day?
A typical day, I would try and be in the car by 7 o'clock, and I would drive until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I wanted to stop. Partly, part of the reason I wanted to stop at that point was I was getting tired, and also to had a better chance of getting a hotel or a motel room. Incidentally, I had a budget, and I didn't want to spend more than $100 a day. Best deal I got in a really ratty motel was 68.
So you would stop at 2, then you'd try to make sure you could find a motel in that area,
right,
and then look for a place to eat. And
well, it was important to find a place to eat that also had a restaurant near. Find a place to live, because so it had a restaurant nearby.
Right.
Because with my car, the lighting was about as good as 2 flashlights, and it's a 6-volt battery system, and so I hesitated to drive at night. So, and the cheaper the motel, the further away someplace else is to eat. So that was a bit of a problem sometimes.
Now, I mean, talking about from 7 to 2, you're driving, you have no radio, and no entertainment. Most of the time, you were on your own. Did you get lonely, or you just found watching the scenery kept you going? What was going on in your mind?
Well, that was a question that a number of people, when I would stop and got into a conversation, that's one of the things they asked me first is, are you doing it alone? And that was a surprise. Not even a dog or a cat with you? No, nothing, just me. And the other, then of course, the follow-on question is, well, what did you do all day? But it's amazing how it was interesting because we don't spend very much time alone, and I couldn't read or listen to some music or anything like that, but you're concentrating all the time on just driving this car because it's very hard to steer. The steering is very loose, as I mentioned about the braking system. And then as you're driving along, you're listening to any strange noises that you might hear. Yeah, sounds like it's a little bit higher and noted there, and so you're worrying about the car. You have to stop and get petrol. The tank is 10 gallons, and I would though generally fill up when it got to be just a little bit below half. And so that's a number of stops in a day. I would go, I would say about, I haven't done the math on it yet, but I think I would go about average 70 miles a day.
Okay.
Now that doesn't sound like very much driving from 7 in the morning to 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but a lot happens in between.
Well, I want to go through at least a little bit of the beginning, which was leaving Heritage Village to go to Provincetown on Cape Cod, because you really wanted to start, at the end on the Atlantic coast and make it official.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was too many days before you came back, which made sense to stop off at your condo here in Heritage Village rather than get a motel along Route 6 if you're very close by. But that first couple of hours, I guess, a couple of 100 miles from Provincetown ended up to be pretty interesting.
Well, I don't know how interesting it was, but what had happened is that I was going along pretty well, going up to Cape Cod, because the Route 6, it's the very beginning is Provincetown in Cape Cod. And then when I got back to, I was going through Providence, Rhode Island, and I broke down. Fortunately, it was right near a hotel, so that I could, somebody helped push it into the hotel car park. And I ended up there, then you have to look for how am I going to get this fixed. And so it ended up in that case that I'm a member of the AAA, yeah. And I don't want to confuse it with AA. So they towed me from Rhode Island to New Milford, Connecticut, where as I mentioned earlier, I was
A mechanic there that you knew, Ted.
Ted.
We don't want to talk about Ted right now, but
so he, and so it ended up, that's I said earlier in my story, that he's the one that I got this $3,000 bill. and I'm making a joke out of the fact that it was 3,000, but it was worth it because one, he's a very good mechanic, and two, you know, it's pretty difficult sometimes to find parts, or if you can find a source, and there are small companies that are continuing to manufacture parts for Model A enthusiasts. And so it ended up that I was here about 3 weeks, waiting for that to be complete, and then drove along. So that was sort of part one. Then,
Well, I have to interject a little bit. So what you found is your front axle had been bent or broken?
oh, that was one of. I mean, the radiator needed to be completely replaced. All the hoses needed to be replaced. The water pump needed to be replaced. The head had to be ground down because the gasket, head gasket blew. The axle got bent, and it was just, now these things, they were just wearing out. But until I did this sort of test run, which turned out to be a test run up to Massachusetts and back, that we found all these bugs. So he
Right. Now, I have to say, from my point of view, that would have been enough to discourage me from going forward. But it didn't discourage you. And I have to tell the story that then you came back to the cluster, you were getting ready to start up again, which was now late July 2017, I think it was. And we were all excited about you going again, a little nervous because who knows if you're going to break down when you get to New Jersey or whatever. And you went out that morning to get ready to go, and you turned the switch, turned the key, and had a dead battery.
Dead battery.
Now that would have been another sign to me that I shouldn't go, but...
Oh, that was awful. I was all really ready to go, and the darn car wouldn't start. And so I drove in my real car. I drove over to Danbury, went to Sears, bought a battery, and then bought another piece of equipment, which I think they call it a jump starter, which is a battery that's connected so that you just put these two
wires and
wires
connectors
onto the battery, and there you got your battery, and boom, it starts. So that's how I got it started, but there I was running with a bad battery. So and I got to my first hotel, and I changed it and put in the new battery that I had, and then I was all right for the rest of the time. I was that was in Poughkeepsie, I think it was, and
now,
there.
So from there, you know, you took off, and we were kind of concerned. We didn't hear much about you, and I think it was 3 or 4 weeks you were on the road until you came back, and you had obviously made it all the way to Clinton, Iowa.
Clinton, Iowa. I got that far.
And I think you wanted to recommend for everybody looking for a place to vacation, Clinton, Iowa is
it's pretty flat. There's corn as far as you can see on this side of the road, and soybeans on the other side of the road.
It reminds me of somebody who once said to me, or I asked them what I should do when I got to a certain town, and they said, when you get there, just keep going. But the car obviously didn't want to go past Clinton. So.
No, it would not go. And so, again, looking for a place to get it fixed, and I found a chap who restores old Mercedes-Benz. I said, well, mine's a Model A. Well, I have a buddy that has a Model A, and we've worked together on them, so I think I can help you. And so I waited around for 5 days, and they said, there's really, there's quite a bit we're going to have to do. I suggest you leave it with us. You can store it over the winter, but leave it with us, and then pick it up next year and continue your journey. So that's exactly what I had to do. Hence, then now I'm in stage 2 of my trip.
So winter of 2017 and 2018 go by, and comes, I think, June of 2018. You are all ready to go to Clinton, Iowa, which is a very easy place to get to. A lot of direct flights from Southbury to Clinton, but I think you decided to fly out of White Plains. And how did that go?
Well, that went pretty well. I can't. What did it?
Well, I think you got there. They got you on the plane. You went out on the tarmac.
Oh,
and
yes,
then,
that's
and then they
right.
brought you back in. Then
Yeah.
they took you back onto the plane. Went
Yep.
out to the tarmac. Brought you back in.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
they
yeah.
told you.
I'm surprised you
I
remember
think
that.
it was like 4 more days till the next flight was available or something.
That's right.
Again,
Yes, exactly.
something that would have
Yeah.
said to me, I
And-
guess I shouldn't do this. But it didn't deter you.
No.
And I think the next day you ended up going out of LaGuardia
Yeah.
and continued the flight or the path to Clinton.
Yeah.
And when you got there,
Hey,
you had a big ribbon around the car, and
Well, let me tell you, before I departed from Heritage Village, and it's now, I left it in, I think it was end of August, early September, and I didn't think very much about it all winter. And when it got time to pick it up, I could not remember the name of the garage.
Ooh.
And vaguely I remembered when I got there where it was, but I couldn't remember the name of it. So I called, went to Google, and found, I remembered that it was a Mercedes connection. Called the Mercedes dealer, one of them in Clinton. No, we don't, we can't help you, I'm sorry. I said, well, look, I've left my car with you or somebody, someone, no, but hold on. And so he goes back and he said, do you remember the guy's name? Yeah, I said, it's Steve. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, we found him. It's Steve's. But the name of his garage, well, that's a different name, but we know who you're talking about. And so anyway, I found my car.
And the car was ready?
And my car was ready, yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned this before, but I now understand a lot better what you meant by while you're driving, you are listening. Because you had so many things, by the time you left Clinton, so many things that had gone wrong. I'm sure you're listening and worrying a little bit
right.
about, especially when you mentioned about, I think it was Nebraska, 160 miles with no service.
Yep.
If you hear something not so good, 100 miles into that
Right.
distance, you could be out of luck. But you seem to always make things work out.
Well, let me say this. It turned out that the most interesting adventures was on the occasions that I broke down, because that involved me then with one, who do I call? What can you do? Who's going to fix an old car like this? I'm a member of the American Model A Club, which has a membership of about 5,000 people. In the directory, there's the name, address, and telephone number. So I went through the whole directory. I don't know how many pages long it is. And with knowing the address, I could figure out where that was in relationship to Route 6.
Okay.
So in my maps, and I had 14 maps, one for each state, and then with a line drawn showing the route, and then I'd put dots where people lived. And it worked out very well, because almost in every occasion, I was able, maybe the man I called couldn't help me, but he'd say, look, Joe can, let me give you his number. And then Joe I'd connect with him. And then a whole new adventure started. He didn't have a part, but he knew a friend who had a part, so that friend would come over, and there was always an adventure. And in one case, where I needed to stay somewhere. What was his name? Wendell. This was in Ohio, and Wendell said, well, down the road there's a tourist lodge. And he said, I think you might stay there. That'll do. Otherwise, there's nothing else. So I go to the lodge, and it was called Black Hawk Lodge. That was it. And I'm there. I was presented. The owner came out, and immediately, I mean, she was a character out of she was like a grade B movie star of the 40s and early 50s. And she had, just looked like a real character. And she said, the first thing she said is, look, I got a room for you, but I'm not feeding you. We don't do a breakfast anymore. I stopped that last summer. But you can stay here. And it'll be, I got that one for $50 a night. So I agreed. And so what came around dinner time, I didn't know what I was going to do. And the lady said, well, I suppose you want to eat, don't you? I said, yes. Come here and eat with us. And he was my husband, and he was another character. And so I got dinner. And then in the morning I got up, and he was out on the porch having his breakfast. He said, come on up and join me in breakfast, so, which was a candy bar and a cup of coffee. So I had my breakfast. I had lunch at Wendell's house with he and his wife, and then went back to the hotel and had dinner. Anyway, the point is, I had all my meals and everything, and my lodging, and it didn't cost me a penny. The woman, when it came when it came time for me to leave, she said, we've enjoyed your company so much, and your car has been such a joy to us, and particularly my husband. She said, I'm not going to charge you anything. Well, I knew that she drank bourbon, so I went to the local town, got the biggest bottle of bourbon they had, presented that to her, and thanked her very much.
Nice.
And those kinds of, I've got a lot of stories like that.
Well, let me just getting back to the travel log, if you
Yeah.
will. So then you, beginning of this summer, you get to Clinton.
See,
find
he's keeping me to the program here.
And I have to be honest, I thought you were going to try and just do a few more states, but you left Clinton and you went all the way through to the end.
I got on Route 7 and...
Six.
Route 6.
Don't confuse me.
All the way to California.
Which included going through some pretty large states.
The thing is that this Nebraska, Utah,
Colorado, Nevada.
Colorado too. But there were long periods where where you just see corn and soybeans, and so it sometimes it got a bit tedious. I used to driving along and not listening and all that, and thinking about, sort of reviewing your life if you will. I felt, well, what do people who are doing in solitary confinement? I mean, what do they do all day? Anyway, so then, but the biggest adventure there from Iowa was then crossing the Rockies, and that was very exciting. Not as dangerous as everyone had led me to believe, but it was really thrilling and going through that Love Canyon.
Loveland Pass, and I think we have a good picture of Loveland Pass, which is the Continental Divide. And just to remind everybody, it means if it rains on the west side of the Continental Divide, that raindrop will go to the Pacific Ocean. If it's on the east side of the Continental Divide, it'll end up in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
But I believe Loveland Pass is just about 12,000 feet up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, you used to talk about having to change your carburetor in order to get your engine to work well at that. But your 40 horsepower
sailed right along. Well, it was in second gear most of the time.
Okay.
We're 3 gears forward, and but it was. I was very lucky. It was a cool day because one of the big problems with even the older cars.
You don't have air conditioning either, do you?
No, not
You either
very
have
much.
the top down or the top up.
Yeah.
That's air conditioning.
But it was a cool day, and I think that helped.
Okay.
And I got up without having to stop for overheating. I kept a careful eye out, 200, okay, because I think boiling point is 212 or something. So I begin to get close, and then I go even a little bit slower, and just nurse it along.
All right. So from there, your destination was Bishop, California.
Bishop, California.
Which is not the coast. It's a little
No.
further inland, but officially that's where Route 6 ends.
The official ending was in Bishop, California. That's right.
And I think we say it's what, 3,000, was it 3,000?
Well, that's debatable. There's so many different mileages because it's 3,220 if you count from a certain place in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Right.
And if you measure from there, do you end up do you measure to Bishop, which is official ending, or do you measure it from where the new extension? It was about 1956 or 57. They extended the original Route 6 out to Los Angeles. And so if you include that, then it's 200 miles more. But I thought I wanted to get to the end of Bishop, and I was finished. I didn't want to travel anymore.
And from there, you put the car on a truck, and you came back.
Yeah.
I guess by airplane, but
Yeah.
the truck came back. The car came back by truck.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's safe back here in Heritage Village.
And it's back in Heritage Village, and incidentally, it's running like a dream.
All right. So going back to when you first thought about doing this, what would you say most surprised you about what you experienced over those 3,000 plus miles and several breakdowns and everything else?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest surprises is I did it. And looking back, okay, it was a challenge, but I was never really sure that I was going to succeed. But I did it, and then a strange thing happened. I had sort of a sinking feeling. It's like you're getting yourself ready for opening night, and you're an actor, and you're all keyed up, and then you've done it and you succeeded. It was a good play, and then there's a letdown, And I felt the same way about getting to a Bishop. The next morning when I woke up, okay, now what do you do?
All right.
But
well-
other surprises, I was surprised really that the reception that I would receive and the help that people gave me. I mean, simple asking directions. This was in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, incidentally, is a long state. I stopped at a fire station. There was the doors were open and the fire trucks were there. So I pulled in to get directions, and because as Ed said, I didn't have any GPS or anything like that.
If I could, just to remind everybody, he was using this device, this technical
That was my
innovation is called a road map. You might want to show this to some of the younger generation who probably haven't seen this technique.
and.
Anyway, the
So
fire
I just pulled in, and they were very interested, and I asked him. I said, "What's the?" There were about 5 of them. They were all retired firemen, if you can believe it. And what do they do when they retire? They go to the fire station, and they still work on the fire engines. And I said, why are you doing that? You're retired. He said, because the new people that they hire to be firemen, they want to put out fires only. They're not interested in the mechanics of the engine. So we come as volunteers, and we continue to maintain these fire trucks. And we went on about different things. Then I said, you don't know where I could get some non-detergent oil? I only got about 3 or 4 pints left. Oh, yes, yeah. Well, Napa, they'll definitely have them. Charlie, do you have Napa's number? Do you know what they... Yeah, oh, good. Would you call him and ask him to bring over, how many pints do you want? I said, I don't know, 9 or 10. Tell him to bring over 10, would you? And 10 minutes later, this guy arrives with the oil. I mean, I can't believe that's going to happen in Connecticut.
Well, it might. I mean,
But that's just one little incident.
I mean, I do get this sense in talking to you that an overall conclusion is the overall friendliness of Americans that you ended up seeing.
Yeah.
We don't know if that's statistically significant because your car brings out a certain group of people maybe, although, again, and hopefully we'll share some of the photos you have, they weren't just people over 70. There were young people who were coming up to your car also.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
And I get a sense talking to you, you didn't have any negative experience. You never had people who were rude, dismissive of you.
No.
Everybody.
I had only one bad, it was my own fault. I had my camera stolen. That was the only thing. But it was my own fault. I left it there on the front seat, went in to do whatever it was I was doing, but that's the only unpleasantness. Yeah.
So if you had to do it over again, or if you will, if you knew then what you know now, 4 years ago, would you still think you would still do the trip?
Oh yeah. Oh sure I would.
Okay.
But I think being 81 years old, that made it also special. That I was able to. That was all part of the challenge.
Right.
But sure, I would do it again.
So I'm not 81 yet. What if I was thinking of doing this trip? What advice would you give me?
Yeah. Do it.
Well, okay, just do it. Don't worry about it. Don't.
No.
The older the car, the better.
Yeah, there's a good point. Maybe a Stanley Steamer.
There you go. I'll see.
1900. The Model A was the best car to do it in because its engine, it's known to be very simple construction.
So before I give you an opportunity to make any other final comments, what's your plan as far as what are you going to do with this adventure? Are you going to try and write another
Yeah,
book?
Yeah, I'm going to. I've kept a journal of all the places I went to and things that happened to me, and so I'm going to, as I did with my autobiography, yeah, I'm going to write it up. I contacted the publisher that did my other book, and he said, "Oh, just give me a manuscript and let me look at it." Well, that's the hard part.
Okay.
Actually sitting down and writing it. That
Well-
took me 3 winters to write.
Well, some people.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
I'm to do it and to include some
Okay.
things that
And do you have another adventure kind of on the drawing table?
not at
Not
the
yet?
moment, no.
Okay.
I have an idea of having it transported, as I had it transported back from California here, is to have it transported to Arkansas. And then I'll drive back up through Arkansas, from Arkansas through the south
Right.
and back up. I'm
So like through Texas and New Mexico, Arizona.
no, going. I'm going to. That's. I'm no from. No. I've had enough sagebrush for the last. It's. That's why I'll start from
Arkansas,
Arkansas,
head to the northeast.
and get the southern states,
Okay.
Tennessee, etc.
All right.
On up.
And if anybody wants to come along with you for the ride, should they knock on your door, or what do you want?
Well, if
Or would you rather go alone?
if she's pretty,
Uh-huh.
about 40 years old, and would like to join me, yes.
Okay. Well, there's the invitation. So, David, I want to.
I don't want to be swamped with it.
Any final comments you'd like to make, or?
No, I would just like to say it's been fun talking to
Yeah,
you.
well, same here.
I've had no experience with these TV interviews, but again, this is all, the adventure hasn't
Right.
stopped.
The adventure continues. Well, David, thank you for stopping by and for
Thanks.
sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank
stay
you.
tuned for future editions of On the Town to